Hello again. In this video, I'm going to talk about why having ADHD doesn't need to feel like it's a curse. And you may have been recently diagnosed with ADHD, or you may have been struggling with ADHD most of your life. But I think the general attitude toward ADHD is that it's a disorder. It's even the name. But here I'm about to explain why ADHD doesn't need to be something that's always holding you back. I've been treating ADHD in my patients for decades, and I have also many friends and colleagues who have ADHD. I mentioned colleagues, and I'm a pediatrician, so I went through medical school and been a doctor. So many of my doctor friends actually have ADHD, and I hope this is not a surprise to you because there are so many examples of extremely successful adults who have ADHD who did struggle when they're in school and perhaps still struggling, but it didn't stop them from being successful adults and achieving their goals and reaching their dreams. So, ADHD tends to affect children most because they haven't had the chance to deal with their ADHD or figure out different ways to work around their ADHD obstacles um, over the course of years and decades. Whereas adults, for many reasons, for one reason is that they've been living with ADHD for a long time. So they know what's their capacity, they know their own limitations. So a lot of times they figure out over the years different ways to work around it. If they know that they tend to get distracted when they're sitting in a large classroom, I have one friend who does that. He would always sit in the very front row of any seminar or classes because he said if he sits in the back, everyone in front of him will be too distracting for him to really focus on what the speaker is talking about. And I know another guy who he actually has two PhD degrees, and he realized when he was in college that he has to be reading three different books at the same time. If he reads one book, he will lose interest because he will bored, his mind will drift off. But if he has three books in front of him, he can just shift attention from one book, and if he realizes that his attention is shifting off from that, or it's getting bored, he will move to the second book and move to the third book and just go back and forth. I mean, I almost envy that ability because for me it'll be too confusing, but for him it works, and maybe that's why he has two PhD degrees, and most of us don't. So there's so many examples of ADHD. So I always tell my patients that, especially the kids who are newly diagnosed, I said, I don't ever want you to think that by having ADHD, I don't want you to think I cannot do that. I cannot do this science project. I cannot do this math homework because I have ADHD. That's just not an excuse for me. True, having ADHD may make things harder, and especially when it comes to doing things that requires a lot of attention. But you can do this. This is possible, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do this because you have ADHD. You can do anything you want. Um, the road of to get there may be challenging, more challenging than most, perhaps, but not impossible. All right. On that note, have a wonderful day and see you next time.